Charles Darwin, Islands, Ideas, and the Courage to Question English Learning Story. Have you ever watched an animal and suddenly wondered, why does it look like that? Why does it live here and not there? Why are some animals strong and others small and quiet? This is the story of a man who asked those questions, not just once, but his whole life. A man who traveled on a ship for 5 long years, visited wild islands, walked inside rainforests, and filled notebooks with observations. A man who changed the way we understand life itself. This is the story of Charles Darwin, a quiet boy, a careful observer, and a thinker who had the courage to question old beliefs. Today, you will learn English through his journey of islands, ideas, and the courage to say, the world is more complex and more beautiful than we ever imagined. It is 1859 in London. In a small, simple room, a man with a tired face and kind eyes sits at a wooden desk. His name is Charles Darwin. On the desk lies a thick manuscript, pages full of notes, examples, diagrams, and quiet revolution. The title reads, On the Origin of Species. Charles Darwin knows that when this book is printed, the world will never see life the same way again. He also knows that many people will be angry. Some will say his ideas are dangerous. Some will say he is wrong. Some will say he should stay silent. His hand shakes slightly as he touches the pages. But then he remembers the tiny birds on the Galapagos Islands, the fossils in South America, the turtles, the iguanas, the strange plants, the long years of study and doubt and thinking. He takes a deep breath and whispers, "It is time." He sends the manuscript to the publisher. The book will soon shock the world. But before this moment, before the fame, before the controversy, before the big ideas, Charles Darwin was just a curious boy who liked to collect things. That is where our story begins. Part 1. A Curious Child in a Quiet Town. Charles Robert Darwin was born in 1809 in Shrewsbury, England, a quiet town with green fields, a slow river, and gentle hills. He came from a comfortable family. His father, Robert Darwin, was a successful doctor, tall, serious, and respected. His mother, Susanna, was warm and kind, but she died when Charles was only 8. Her death left a quiet sadness inside him that never fully disappeared. Charles grew up with brothers and sisters in a big house with a garden and yard. From an early age, he did something again and again. He collected things, rocks, shells, bird eggs, beetles, plants. He filled his pockets with natural treasures until they almost broke. His father sometimes sighed and said, "Charles, you care more about worms and beetles than your schoolwork." But Charles could not stop. Nature was his secret language. The boy who loved beetles. At school, Charles was not the best student. He did not stand out in Latin or mathematics. He was not loud or especially brilliant in class. But outside of school, he was alive. He walked through fields, lifting stones to see what lived under them. He studied birds with simple joy. He chased insects with great excitement. Later, at university, Charles became almost obsessed with collecting beetles. He wrote letters to other collectors. He traded specimens. He learned their names. Once, he saw two rare beetles at the same time. He quickly grabbed one beetle in each hand. Then he saw a third rare one. With no free hands, he did something funny and wild. He popped one beetle into his mouth to keep it safe. But the beetle released a horrible chemical, and Charles had to spit it out, losing the beetle and his dignity at the same time. He laughed about this story for years. It showed something important about him. He was deeply curious and sometimes a little too enthusiastic. A future as a doctor or a pastor? Charles's father wanted him to have a respectable career. At first, he sent Charles to study medicine at the University of Edinburgh. Charles went to lectures, watched operations, and tried to learn. But there was a problem. In those days, there was no anesthesia. The operations were bloody, painful, and difficult to watch. Charles felt sick. He could not stand the screams of patients. He realized he did not want to be a doctor. His father was disappointed. So they tried another plan. Charles would become a country pastor. A simple, calm job in a church. He went to Cambridge to study theology. But again, something else caught his attention. Not the church. Not the Bible studies, though he respected them. It was nature. The professor who changed his life. At Cambridge, Charles met a professor named John Stevens Henslow. Henslow taught botany, the study of plants, but he did more than teach. He walked with students in the countryside, showing them flowers, trees, rocks, and insects. He invited Charles to join these walks. Together they examined plants, talked about geology, discussed science. Henslow noticed something special about Charles. He was not extremely clever in theory, but he had a strong talent for careful observation. Henslow once said, "Darwin is a young man of remarkable patience and attention to detail." Charles admired Henslow deeply. He later called him the man who made me a naturalist. Under Henslow's guidance, Darwin began to think, maybe my future is not in the church. Maybe it is in nature. A letter that changed everything. One day, when Charles was 22, Henslow received a letter from a ship's captain named Robert Fitzroy. The British Navy was preparing a scientific voyage on a ship called HMS Beagle. They needed a young naturalist, someone who would collect samples, make observations, write notes, study animals, plants, and rocks in different parts of the world. Henslow thought of one person, Charles Darwin. He told Charles, "There's a chance for you to sail around the world. You will see new lands, new species, new worlds of nature. Would you like to go?" Charles's heart raced. A voyage around the world? Exotic animals? Unknown islands? Yes. But his father said, "No, it is a waste of time." For a moment, it seemed like the dream was over, but fate had other plans. Part 2. The voyage begins. The world opens. A father's doubt. A friend's help. When Professor Henslow told Darwin about the HMS Beagle voyage, Charles felt excitement running through his whole body. But his father, Dr. Robert Darwin, said firmly, "No, Charles, you will lose time. You will not earn money. You will not become a pastor. It is foolish." Charles felt his dreams shake like a small boat in a storm. He respected his father. He didn't want to disappoint him. But something in Darwin's heart whispered, "This is the chance of a lifetime." Darwin wrote a letter to his uncle, Josiah Wedgwood. A kind, intelligent man who believed deeply in curiosity and education. When his uncle read the letter, he smiled and said, "Of course Charles must go. This journey will shape him." He visited Dr. Darwin and spoke passionately. "Let the boy go. He has a gift. Let him see the world." After a long discussion, Darwin's father finally sighed and said, "Very well, he may go." It was the yes that changed history. Setting sail on the HMS Beagle. On December 27, 1831, 22-year-old Charles Darwin stood on the deck of the HMS Beagle. The ship was small, crowded, and full of supplies. Darwin felt nervous, excited, and a little seasick. He looked at the endless ocean and whispered, "What will I discover?" Captain Fitzroy greeted him, a strict but intelligent man. Darwin wasn't hired as a sailor. He was a naturalist, a scientist in training. His job was to observe nature, collect specimens, study geology, keep a detailed journal, send reports back to England. He carried notebooks, jars, tools, and a heart full of curiosity. The ship sailed from England into the open sea. The voyage that would change science had begun. Trouble at sea. Life on the Beagle was not easy. Darwin suffered from terrible seasickness. The ship rocked wildly during storms. Waves crashed over the deck. Sometimes Darwin could barely stand, barely breathe. He wrote in his journal, "I wish I could be anywhere but this ship," but each time the Beagle reached land, all discomfort disappeared. Darwin jumped onto shore like a boy escaping school. Nature was waiting, and Darwin was ready. Brazil, a green world of wonders. One of the first major stops was Brazil. Darwin stepped into a rainforest for the first time. The trees rose like giants, their leaves glowing green in the sunlight. Colorful parrots flew over his head. Monkeys screamed playfully from the branches. Huge butterflies danced around him. Darwin felt as if he had walked into another universe. He wrote, "The mind is overwhelmed by the beauty of this forest." But he also witnessed something darker. Enslaved people working on Brazilian plantations. Darwin hated slavery. It shocked him deeply. He wrote angrily, "I cannot understand how one man can own another. This experience shaped Darwin's belief that all living beings deserve dignity. Argentina, stories written in stone. As the Beagle sailed south to Argentina, Darwin explored the land in search of fossils, and he found many. Giant bones buried in the sand, enormous extinct sloths, giant armadillos, strange creatures with no modern equivalent. But something confused him. Why were these fossils similar to animals still living in South America, yet so different? Why did giant extinct animals resemble the smaller animals living nearby? Why weren't these fossils found in Europe? Questions began forming inside Darwin's mind. Questions that would later bloom into radical ideas. Earthquakes in Chile. In Chile, Darwin experienced something terrifying. A huge earthquake. The ground shook violently. Buildings collapsed. People screamed. The sea moved strangely, but Darwin did not panic. He observed. He noticed that the earthquake lifted the land, raising the coastline by several feet. He wrote, "The earth is much more alive than we think." He realized that the world was not fixed. The earth changed, slowly or suddenly, shaping landscapes and influencing life. This idea fit into his growing thoughts about nature and time. A mind opening wider. As Darwin traveled from island to island, country to country, he filled notebooks with thousands of observations. He noted how animals adapted to their environments, how plants survived in dry or wet climates, how geography shaped species, how similar animals had small differences depending on where they lived. These small details were like puzzle pieces. Darwin did not yet know what picture they formed, but he sensed something big was hiding in plain sight. A pattern, a principle, a story written by nature itself. And soon, the Beagle would reach a place that would give him the clearest clues of all. Islands filled with birds, tortoises, and secrets, the Galapagos Islands, a place that would change everything. Part 3. The Galapagos, a natural lab of life. Arrival at a strange new world. In September 1835, after almost 4 years at sea, the HMS Beagle reached a group of barren, volcanic islands in the Pacific Ocean. Their name, the Galapagos Islands. Darwin looked at the dark rocks, the twisted lava, and the silent land and thought, "Where have we arrived? This place looks like another planet." The islands were hot, dry, and harsh, but they were also full of mysteries. Even before stepping ashore, Darwin could sense that something special waited for him here. The giant tortoises, clues in their shells. As Darwin walked inland, he heard a slow, heavy sound, like stones moving. Then he saw them, giant tortoises, bigger than anything he had ever seen. Some weighed over 200 kilograms. They moved slowly, but their eyes watched him with calm curiosity. Islanders told Darwin, "Each island has a different kind of tortoise." Darwin looked closely. Some tortoises had high, curved shells that let them stretch their necks upward. Others had low, rounded shells because they ate food close to the ground. Why would animals on nearby islands look so different? How did these differences appear? Darwin wrote in his notebook, "Here, nature experiments." He didn't yet know it, but this would become one of the most important ideas in science. The famous finches. Next, Darwin saw small brown birds on every island. At first, he didn't think they were special. But after collecting many specimens, he noticed something surprising. Their beaks were different. Some had long, thin beaks perfect for catching insects. Some had short, thick beaks perfect for cracking seeds. Some had sharp beaks for eating cactus fruit. Some had strong beaks for crushing nuts. Yet all of them were finches, the same type of bird. Different islands, different food, different beaks. Why? Darwin wrote, "One might imagine that from an original species, different forms have been shaped for different ends." He didn't fully understand it yet, but the question burned quietly in his mind. Marine iguanas, a creature of the sea. Darwin then met one of the strangest animals he had ever seen, the marine iguana. A lizard that swam in the ocean and ate seaweed. He watched them dive into the waves, their dark bodies moving smoothly underwater. Darwin was fascinated. How can a lizard live in the sea? He wondered. He examined their long claws, their salty skin, their flattened tails. Every part of their body was perfectly suited for life in the water. He realized nature adapts. Animals change to fit their environment. But how? That question followed him everywhere. Mockingbirds and more clues. On each island, Darwin also collected mockingbirds. He noticed differences. The birds on San Cristobal were darker. Those on Hispaniola had longer beaks. Those on Floriana had unique markings. He wrote, "These birds differ island by island." He started to think, what if animals did not appear exactly as they are? What if they changed slowly over very long periods of time? What if nature shaped them generation after generation? He shook his head. The idea was huge, almost frightening. A notebook full of questions. Darwin spent days walking across the islands, climbing volcanic hills, collecting insects, studying plants, observing birds breaking open rocks, measuring lava formations, noting every detail. His notebooks were filled with careful observations. What explains the little differences? How did species arrive here? Why do they not live on nearby islands? What is the connection between fossils and living animals? Each question was a small light. Together, they formed a path toward an idea that would change science. The islands transformed Darwin. The Galapagos did not give Darwin immediate answers. Instead, they gave him patterns. Patterns in beaks. Patterns in shells. Patterns in behavior. Patterns in differences between nearby islands. patterns that suggested something bold and new. Species are not fixed. They change. They adapt. They evolve. But Darwin was not ready to announce such an idea yet. It was too big, too new, too risky. He needed more evidence, more thought, more years of study. The voyage must continue. Leaving the islands, carrying the questions. After 5 weeks, the Beagle prepared to leave the Galapagos. Darwin stood on the deck and looked back at the volcanic land. The sun burned the rocks. The wind carried the smell of salt. Marine iguanas climbed across black lava. Darwin whispered, "I will remember everything I have seen here." He carried with him boxes filled with specimens, jars of insects, dried plants, bird skins, tortoise shells, notes, and drawings, and questions. So many questions. The Beagle sailed away, but the Galapagos stayed alive inside Darwin's mind. The seeds of a great idea had been planted. Soon they would grow. Part 4. The long thinking. A theory takes shape. Home again, but forever changed. In October 1836, after almost 5 years at sea, the HMS Beagle finally returned to England. Charles Darwin stepped onto land, his home soil, feeling older, wiser, and filled with strange new thoughts. He greeted his family. He hugged old friends. He slept in a normal bed for the first time in years. But inside his mind, the journey continued. His notebooks were full of clues. Fossil giants in Argentina, earthquakes in Chile, rainforest animals in Brazil, shell shapes in the Andes, marine iguanas, mockingbirds, finches, giant tortoises. All of them were whispering the same secret. Darwin did not know it yet, but he was about to spend the next 20 years trying to understand what nature had shown him. Why do similar animals on different islands have small differences? He examined bird beaks under a magnifying glass. He measured tortoise shells. He studied earthworms, barnacles, pigeons, dogs, horses, plants, fossils. Nature became his teacher, his puzzle, his universe. He took long walks near his home in the village of Down. Neighbors often saw him walking in circles along a path he called the Sandwalk. He walked for hours, thinking. The world believed Darwin was just a calm, gentle naturalist, but inside him was a quiet storm. A visit from the finches. At first, Darwin did not understand the importance of the finches from the Galapagos. He had mixed some specimens from different islands. He did not label them perfectly. He was young, tired, and traveling quickly. But then a famous ornithologist named John Gould examined the birds. He said, "Darwin, these are not all the same. They are different species of finches." Different species? On nearby islands? Darwin felt his heart race. This was not a small detail. It was a sign that species could change. The finches were the first real evidence that species were not fixed forever. Nature was flexible, nature was creative, nature was writing stories of change and adaptation. A secret notebook, Transmutation of Species. Darwin began writing inside a private notebook. He didn't show it to anyone. On the first page, he drew a simple sketch, a small branching tree. Above it, he wrote, "I think." The tree was the first drawing of the idea that species had one ancestor and split into many forms over time. It was the beginning of the idea we now call evolution. He kept the notebook hidden. He knew the idea was dangerous if he said aloud that species change over time. Many people would attack him, but the thought kept growing. Nature's method, a new understanding. Darwin began noticing patterns everywhere. Animals produce more offspring than the environment can support. Most do not survive. Only some do. Those survivors usually have some helpful trait. A sharper beak, faster legs, better camouflage, stronger claws, thicker fur, smarter behavior. Those useful traits allow them to live longer, find food more easily, and produce more offspring. Their children inherit the helpful traits. Over many generations, those traits become common. Step by step, small changes accumulate. Darwin realized nature selects the best survivors. He called this idea natural selection. It was a simple idea, but also revolutionary. It explained why species adapt, why they change, why the Galapagos finches had different beaks. It was like holding a lantern in a dark cave. Suddenly, the whole cave was visible. But Darwin stayed silent. Even with growing evidence, Darwin kept his theory secret. He was afraid of the church, afraid of society, afraid of hurting his religious wife, Emma, afraid of making his children a target of criticism, afraid of being mocked or rejected by scientists. He worked slowly, carefully, cautiously. He wrote draft after draft. He improved his examples. He collected more evidence. He studied pigeons and wrote pages about how humans breed them selectively, a small model of nature's process. He studied barnacles for 8 years, learning every detail of their anatomy. Why barnacles? Because Darwin believed that to understand big things, you must also understand small things. He lived a quiet life, but inside his study, a revolution was taking shape. A scientist across the world. In 1858, after more than 20 years of slow thinking, Darwin received a letter from a young naturalist named Alfred Russel Wallace, who was working in Indonesia. Darwin opened the letter and read the words. His face went pale. Wallace had discovered almost the exact same idea of evolution and natural selection. Darwin felt shock, fear, and respect. Wallace was brilliant, honest, hardworking, and he had reached the same conclusion independently. Darwin wrote, "I would rather burn my whole work than be unfair to Wallace." The two scientists agreed to publish their ideas together, a rare act of scientific humility. Now, Darwin had no choice. It was time to speak boldly. It was time to publish the book he had feared for so long. Part 5. The Book That Shook the World. The decision to publish. It was 1859. Charles Darwin had spent more than 20 years collecting facts, observing animals, and thinking deeply about nature. His theory was strong. His notes were full. The evidence was clear, but fear still lived inside his heart. He worried his ideas would anger people, especially religious leaders. He worried his wife Emma, a gentle and faithful woman, would feel hurt by his ideas about life's origins. He worried his children would be judged. He worried scientists would laugh at him. But Wallace's letter had changed everything. If Darwin stayed silent, history would forget his work, and if he spoke, the world might change. So one evening, he looked at his manuscript, a thick stack of pages, and whispered, "Let the truth be known." He titled the book, "On the Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection," and he sent it to be published. The book arrives. On November 24th, 1859, Darwin's book was released. The entire first printing sold out on the first day. Scientists, students, journalists, priests, and ordinary people, everyone wanted to read it. Some read it with excitement, some with shock, some with anger. Newspapers published articles. "Darwin challenges belief. A new theory for life. Are humans animals too?" Darwin had expected controversy. But he did not expect one thing. The book was beautifully clear. Readers found his explanations simple, logical, and full of examples. Instead of sounding arrogant, Darwin wrote gently. He admitted doubts. He explained his reasoning step by step. People felt that they were walking beside him, from the Galapagos to his study room, learning the truth with their own eyes. Praise and anger. The reaction was mixed. Scientists were mostly excited. They had seen similar patterns in nature. Darwin's theory made sense. Young naturalists felt inspired. They saw a new path for biology, but some religious leaders were outraged. They believed Darwin's theory challenged the idea that all species were created exactly as they are. One famous critic mocked Darwin by saying, "If humans come from monkeys, why don't we see monkeys turning into humans today?" Darwin did not answer with anger. He answered calmly, explaining that evolution happens slowly, over thousands or millions of years, not in a single lifetime. Some people misunderstood him, some attacked him. But many listened, and slowly the idea of evolution began to spread. A new light on life. Over time, scientists found more evidence supporting Darwin's ideas. Fossils showing changes in species animals adapting to new environments, plants evolving new forms, similarities in bone structures changes. Caused by selective breeding natural patterns repeated across continents. Darwin had not created a philosophy. He had revealed a process that nature had been using since the beginning of life. His idea became the foundation of modern biology. Even today we understand. DNA, genetics, variation, adaptation, evolution, because Darwin's questions opened the door. He once wrote, "There is grandeur in this view of life." And indeed, there is. A quiet life at Down House. Despite his fame, Darwin did not become a public hero. He lived quietly in Down House, a country home surrounded by gardens and open fields. He spent his days studying earthworms, watching plants grow, observing bees and flowers, testing seeds in salt water, raising pigeons, discussing ideas with his wife and children, walking slowly around the sandwalk path that he loved. He once said, "Calm thinking is the most important tool a scientist can have." He remained gentle, polite, and humble. He never claimed to have all the answers. He simply offered what he had observed. Even earthworms taught him. One of Darwin's last major studies was on earthworms. People laughed. They asked, "Why study worms after studying evolution?" Darwin smiled. "To understand big things," he said, "we must also understand small things." He discovered that earthworms shape the soil, improve plant growth, and help forests survive. From the smallest creatures to the largest, Darwin believed every living thing had a place and a story. The final day. Charles Darwin lived a long life full of curiosity, gentleness, and careful observation. He died peacefully on April 19, 1882, surrounded by family. He was buried in Westminster Abbey, next to great scientists like Isaac Newton, a simple honor for a quiet man who changed everything. His legacy, the courage to question. Darwin once wrote, "I am not the quickest thinker, but I am steady." This was true. He was not loud, not dramatic, not seeking fame. He was patient. He observed. He listened. He asked slowly, carefully, fearlessly, "How does life change?" And because he dared to follow the answer, we now understand the deep story of life on Earth. From tiny finches to giant whales, from seeds to ancient fossils, Darwin revealed that all living things are connected. Life is not fixed. Life is a journey. Life is always changing. And Darwin taught us how to see that change. Epilogue. The man, WHO, followed the evidence. Imagine Charles Darwin walking slowly around the garden path near his house. He stops to watch a small bird. He kneels to look at a worm in the soil. He touches a leaf and turns it gently. To other people, these may be small, boring things, but to Darwin they were clues. Each feather, each shell, each bone, each beak, each seed, all of them were tiny pieces of a great puzzle. He did not rush. He did not shout. He did not try to be famous. He simply observed, thought, and wrote. In his book, he did not say, "This is the final truth." He said, "Here is what I have seen. Here is how it fits together. Here is a way to understand life." He did not try to be famous. He simply observed, thought, and wrote. In his book, he did not say, "This is the final truth." He said, "Here is what I have seen. Here is how it fits together. Here is a way to understand life." Because of him, we now see life not as something frozen, but as something flowing and changing. A long, beautiful story still being written. Moral lesson: be patient with your questions. From Charles Darwin, we can learn some powerful lessons. 1. You don't need to be the fastest. You can be steady. Darwin said himself he was not the quickest thinker, but he was patient and careful. You can be slow and still be strong if you don't give up. 2. Big ideas grow from small details. The shape of a bird's beak, the pattern of a turtle's shell, a simple earthworm. These small things helped create a huge scientific theory. Your small efforts today can grow into big changes tomorrow. 3. It takes courage to question old ideas. Darwin lived in a time when many people thought species never changed. He saw something different in nature. He did not attack others. He did not insult belief. He simply followed the evidence. That's real courage. You don't have to be a famous scientist to follow Darwin's example. You can. Stay curious, question. Kindly observe carefully. Think deeply. Change your mind when new evidence appears. That is the heart of real learning. Thank you for listening to this Charles Darwin story on LinguaTales. If this story helped you improve your English or made you think about life in a new way, like this video, subscribe to LinguaTales. Turn on the notification bell. Share this story with a friend who loves nature or science. Write your answer in the comments. What is one thing in nature that you are curious about? It can be animals, plants, oceans, dinosaurs, evolution, anything. Write in simple English. Don't worry about mistakes. Your curiosity matters more than perfection. We are happy to learn with you. See you in the next story.